Hey guys, I've got a breathing practice I want to show you today. There's a lot of interesting stuff to go over when it comes to breathing. I just finished reading that book, Breath, by James Nestor, so I'm really excited about breathing right now. Today, I want to show you about the movement of breathing, the expansion of the rib cage, where the lungs need to go to get more space, and how you can control that, and by controlling that, how that'll help you to have a healthy spine. I don't want to talk about pacing, and maybe I'll talk about pacing in other videos, but I'm just going to talk about the control of movement today. There's really two different movements that people have when it comes to breathing, either vertical movements or horizontal movements. And in order to understand both those movements, we need to understand the mechanism of how the lungs fill with air and then deflate. The lungs are different from the heart. The heart is like a pump, right? The heart fills with fluid, blood, and then it pumps that blood out, and it squeezes in order to pump that and push that through all the arteries and veins in our body. But the lungs are different. The lungs are more like a vacuum, okay? The lungs will open up through musculature. Musculature will open up the vacuum of the lungs, and there's no kind of pump mechanism that pushes the air in. If we had a pump mechanism, that would be like a ventilator, right? If people are going on oxygen that they need. We don't have anything like that. Instead, as the lungs open up and create space, they then create negative pressure. Negative pressure meaning the pressure of the atmosphere outside of my body is at a higher level of pressure, pushing air into the vacuum of my lungs right here. So as I open up my lungs, then it has negative pressure, the outside air falls into my lungs, I absorb the oxygen, take the carbon dioxide, I squeeze my lungs again. That's the pump mechanism of the lungs, is getting air out, right? So then I squeeze it again and then I push out. But the lungs are just a passive participant in this. They only absorb the chemical transfers. They don't actually create the expansion or the closure. That is happening by the diaphragm and the scalenes and the intercostals, right? The muscles that are surrounding your rib cage, your thoracic cavity. So now let's talk about those two movements here. We need to open up that space in order to create that vacuum. We need to open up the space of the thoracic cavity right here where the lungs are housed so that we can actually open up that vacuum. Now, there's many different ways to do this. The optimal function, though, that we want is whatever will give us maximum opening of the lungs, so that way we can get full breath inside of our lungs. We don't want to have shallow breathing. We also want to make sure that we can use a diversity of different movements so that we're not getting repetitive stress injuries and causing problems within muscles. And I'll talk about that first, okay? So if we get into our vertical breathing here, the most common breathing pattern that most people do when it comes to movements is a vertical up and down breathing like this. And you can see how when I do that, I'm looking at my camera right here, how when I do that I raise up about an inch or even a little bit more as I inhale. That's the most common breathing that people have day in, day out. That's the most common movement that they have. When I do that kind of movement, it takes away from the usage of my diaphragm muscle and instead uses a lot more of my scalenes, these muscles in the front of my neck. What happens with that is then my scalenes get really tight and short and overworked. I get lots of knots and trigger points in there. It starts to impinge on some nerves that come out of my neck. I get all kinds of problems with my neck and my shoulders. And then I get really shallow breathing so that I can eliminate overusing my neck muscles. We don't necessarily want to be doing any kind of vertical breathing, right? We want to do something different from that. Now, a lot of people talk about belly breathing, which would be more in a horizontal breathing. It's a little bit of a mixture of horizontal and vertical, to be honest. When you breathe down here in your belly, and I'll move back so you can see my belly a little bit more. You can see my microphone right on the fire in my shirt there. But when I start to breathe through my belly, that has a horizontal expansion of my lower torso, but it allows a downward vertical expansion in my lungs. So as the diaphragm comes down, right, the diaphragm muscle is a dome, and as that dome, which is right about here, as it compresses down and contracts, it's going to push my organs down. Now, instead of allowing my organs to conflict and stop into my pelvic floor, I'm then allowing my belly to expand and opening up my transverse abdominal muscle to allow my organs to push forward or to push out to the sides. This is nice because it allows a little massage, a little pressure on the organs, which can help with digestion and increased secretion of hormones and enzymes, which can be good for the digestive system. That could be a useful thing to do. But it doesn't always give the lungs the most optimal level of expansion, right? It's just increasing a downward vertical expansion, which is definitely better than that upward vertical expansion overusing the neck muscles. So you can either breathe up with the chest, get that upward expansion, which usually hurts the neck muscles long term. You can do more belly breathing, which is going to get a horizontal expansion of the belly while getting a downward vertical expansion of the lungs as they move down to expand. And then there's the more horizontal movements that you can start to get with the chest. So I can move the chest forward, I can move the chest backward, or I can move out to the sides. And optimally, you would be doing all three of those things. What that allows is the rib cage to open up. There's a little bit of flexibility in the rib cage, so it allows the rib cage to open up in all directions like a balloon expanding. And then within that, the lungs get to expand in each direction. So for horizontal breathing, you're mostly just using that diaphragm. You're not getting a big belly, you're not going up and down, and you're just getting the ribs to move back and forth. And the easiest way to check that is if you take your hands on each side and you just try to push those hands out just a tiny little bit. And you're just moving about 1/2 inch on each side, and that's one of the easiest ways to detect if you're getting a good horizontal breath going on. Optimally, what we want is to be able to breathe in 360 degrees horizontal with our thoracic cavity, with our rib cage, and to be able to get a good belly breath so that we get that downward vertical expansion. That is going to give you the maximum expansion of the lungs, avoiding that upward vertical expansion so we're not overusing the neck. In order to do that, we want to start opening up the expansion of our rib cage. It's pretty easy to push the belly out. That's pretty flexible for us, so it's pretty easy to get that belly breathing right away. The hard part is usually getting the correct expansion in the rib cage in each different direction. So I'm going to show you the 3 different ways to work on that expansion. The first one is getting the chest to move forward and backwards. And I'm just going to turn this way so you can see my chest a little bit better. Okay? So a quick just rule of thumb when it comes to expanding breath and the rib cage is that whatever side you open the most is the side that the direction of expansion is going to go towards, right? So if I open my chest a lot and I extend back and I make the most space of opening my chest right here, that's what's going to expand the most, okay? So if I come right here and I do a big breath, see how my chest move forward and backwards? Now let's say that I open up my back more, okay? So I bend forward like this and I'm opening up my back. Now I take another breath in. Okay, and so there I'm expanding my back and I'm kind of closing down on my front. You can do the same thing if you rotate to the sides. If I were to do a side rotation and I were to breathe, that would expand my side right here. If I were to do a side expansion, a little side bend right here, and I'd breathe, that's going to expand my side. So if I were to take like 5 different breaths in each direction, 5 breaths forward, 5 breaths backwards, 5 breaths on each side, that's a good practice to get started with to open up your rib cage in each direction so you can get the maximum horizontal thoracic cavity expansion occurring. If you combine that thoracic cavity expansion with the belly breathing, and you can get a full expansion, like if I were to take a hand on my chest and a hand down here on my belly, and I were to breathe and try to get all of that to expand and contract at once, that's going to be my maximum expansion for breathing. That's going to help you when it comes to controlling the movement of your breathing, keeping your neck injury free from overbreathing, helping you when you do any kind of competitive events, long distance running, or any kind of hard cardio, keeping the wear and tear down on your body, and making sure that your spine is healthy by decompressing the spine, opening it up, making sure that you're not getting injuries to your spine as you breathe. Remember, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, remember that when you're breathing, you're moving the entire spinal column, right? As I'm belly breathing, I'm expanding through my lower torso, which is at my lumbar spine. As I'm chest and I'm doing a thoracic breathing up here, I'm moving through that thoracic spine and I'm moving it, okay? Now, if I were to get up into that neck and I were to do that vertical breathing, then I'm just clamping down and compressing the neck, right? Because the muscles are attaching to the neck, lifting up on the rib cage, and so they're pulling down on those neck bones, so they're kind of compressing through there. You don't usually want to be trying to do neck breathing to expand the cervical spine. That's not usually effective. So try these, practice it, go in each direction, breathe about 5 times in and out. Try to see if you can get your torso and your belly to fully expand, get as much air into your lungs as possible, and comment down below to tell me how that feels. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.